This video includes a paid sponsorship from Span, but more on that later. If you're about to buy a Tesla Model Y or a Model 3, and you think that leasing is the cheaper option, don't let that low monthly payment fool you. Stick around and I'll show you how leasing a Model 3 or a Model Y may end up costing you substantially more than if you got a traditional loan. So let's dive into the math and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm John and this is Cleanerwatt. First of all, I want to make it really clear that I'm going to be focusing in on personal use cases, not necessarily business use cases. I do understand there are certain business use cases where leasing can make a lot of sense. And in that note also, I'm not a licensed financial professional, nor am I a tax expert. So I definitely recommend that you check out and do some of your own calculations for your exact situation. But nonetheless, I believe most of the information and the calculations that I'm going to do in this video will apply to the vast majority of situations. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, on a surface level, leasing can be very attractive because often you're able to get a much lower monthly payment with a lease. In addition, leases are usually for a short-term 2 or 3 year period, for instance, with the Model 3 or the Model Y, so you get to constantly upgrade your vehicle. However, as I'm going to show, a low monthly payment can be very deceiving, and the convenience of getting a new car every few years comes at a very big cost. Now, when it comes to the loan terms and the leasing terms, I'm actually going with what Tesla currently advertises on their website right now. And for the lease terms, we're choosing a 3-year, 30,000 mile, meaning 10,000 mile a year lease. And for a loan, we're going with Tesla's 6-year loan at 5.44% interest with a $4,500 down payment. For our calculations, in order to make the loan term match the lease term, we're going to assume that after the 3-year lease, for instance, you turn the vehicle in, and after 3 years of your 6-year loan, you sell that vehicle and you get the value out of that. I'm going to be doing these calculations for the Model 3 and the Model Y, and we'll start with the Model Y. But before I dive into these exact calculations, I want to introduce the sponsor of today's video. Thanks to Span for sponsoring this video. In addition to other useful features, the Span Smart Electrical Panel can help extend your battery backup time by somewhere around 40% on average. It is currently compatible with several popular home battery backup systems like the Tesla Powerwall, Solar Edge, and LG Chem. Also, integration with Enphase is coming soon. Span allows you to remotely monitor and track your energy usage and prioritize which circuits get power during a power outage with real-time control, thus eliminating the need for a separate critical loads panel. To find out more and get a quote for your particular situation, go over to span.io or click the link in the video description. And when you do fill out that form to get a quote, make sure that you let Span know that John from Cleanerwatt sent you. When it comes to purchasing a Model Y, unless you have enough cash to pay for that vehicle up front, you need to figure out which method of financing makes the most sense for you. Now, when it comes to a loan versus a lease can be very attractive because the monthly payment is lower in many cases, really in most use cases, versus a loan. For instance, right now you can get a 3-year lease for the Model Y that has a 10,000 mile per year allowance. And if you put $4,500 down, when you add in the fees, Tesla calculates that your monthly payment will be $629 a month. If you were to instead finance that same vehicle at 5.44% interest for 72 months, Tesla estimates that your monthly loan payment for that long-range all-wheel drive Model Y would be around $848 per month. However, once again, that low monthly payment can be very deceiving and it really doesn't tell the whole picture. So we need to actually do a lot more math. First of all, in our calculations, we need to go ahead and add up the total financing cost of a lease versus a loan, which is going to include the monthly payments for 3 years, that down payment, and any applicable fees. So as you can see in that last column, based on the terms that we've talked about, I have the 3-year totals for each of these vehicles, and this represents the finance costs for each of these vehicles. However, in addition to these upfront finance costs, we need to also take into account depreciation and resale value in these calculations. Now, when it comes to an estimate of how much the Model Y will depreciate in 3 years, we can go back, for instance, to March of 2020 when Tesla was selling the long-range all-wheel drive version for $52,990 before fees and the performance version for $60,990 before fees. According to Kelley Blue Book, the long-range all-wheel drive Model Y with 30,000 miles in very good condition is now worth a bit over $45,000 in private resale value. Thus, including the $1,200 delivery fee that you would have paid in 2020, that vehicle has depreciated around 16% over roughly 3 years and 30,000 miles. Using that same source of information, on the flip side, the performance Model Y has lost around 23% of its value in that roughly 3 years and 30,000 miles. However, I'm not just going to use these depreciation numbers straight up because there's only a $4,000 price difference right now between a long-range all-wheel drive and performance Model Y as compared to around an $8,000 difference back in 2020. So these percentages are going to be skewed a bit from 2020 until now. So I'm going to adjust these numbers just a bit, and as a baseline for this, I'm going to compare the used price of a 2020 Model Y with 30,000 miles once again, as compared to a brand new Model Y purchased today. And I believe that'll actually give us a little better understanding of a depreciation number that's going to be more accurate since there's less of a price difference between those vehicles today. So for the long-range all-wheel drive and performance Model Y, if you compare the new price to the used price, once again a 2020 model with 30,000 miles, you can see that a more fair depreciation percentage might actually be somewhere close to 20% or so. So for my estimates, I'm going to assume that in 3 years, so sometime in 2026 for instance, a Model Y will have depreciated roughly 20% from its current value if it has 30,000 miles and is in very good condition. Okay, so using all that information, let's now calculate the true 3-year, 30,000 mile finance cost for a Model Y. And you can see there that I have the 3-year total. You can see that I have the depreciation amount. And then also a really important number that I have there is the loan balance amount. I went over to bankrate.com and they have a great calculator where you can input the amount of the loan, the time length of the loan, and of course the interest rate of that loan, and it'll give you an amortization schedule. And based on that schedule, you can see the estimated loan balance after the 36 loan payments. When it comes to car value, we're assuming, of course, a 20% depreciation of that vehicle from 2023 prices, the current prices. And as you can see, it looks like after 3 years and 30,000 miles that the Model Y will be worth more than what you will owe in a loan if you get a traditional 6-year loan. Thus, you're actually left with a bit of equity in the vehicle after 3 years of payments. Thus, you can take the 3-year totals that we had before based on total finance cost, and you can subtract the equity that you actually have in the vehicle after 3 years of loan payments. And you can see that that drops the true 3-year cost of either of these variants of the Model Y below $20,000 during that period. However, do know also that right now the Model Y is eligible for up to a $7,500 US federal tax credit with the new Inflation Reduction Act. So if you qualify for that full credit and you subtract that from your true 3-year cost, that drops the long-range all-wheel drive Model Y 3-year cost to a bit over $10,000 and the performance version just a bit under $20,000. Now do note that based on my understanding of the Inflation Reduction Act and these tax credit for personal use case vehicles, the $7,500 credit only applies to a purchase of the vehicle and not a lease of the vehicle. However, according to this Kelley Blue Book article, there's kind of a backdoor way here where the company that actually leases a vehicle to the consumer may be able to actually claim the $7,500 credit for themselves. Thus, as this article says, quote, automakers said the credit could be used to reduce leasing prices, trade publication Automotive News explains. Dealers could accept the $7,500 tax credit. They could then apply it to the price of the vehicle before setting lease terms, effectively lowering the sticker price. So I'm not sure if Tesla is able to take advantage of this sort of like a loophole here. And I'm not sure if Tesla is able to gain that $7,500 credit when they lease a vehicle to a consumer. But nonetheless, based on my understanding, it doesn't appear like the consumer that leases a vehicle directly benefits from that $7,500 credit, meaning they can't actually take that credit on their tax return. So with all that being said, when you look at the true 3-year finance cost of a loan versus a lease for a Tesla Model Y, for those who qualify for that full $7,500 US tax credit, that gives us a net difference of $17,568 for the long range all-wheel drive and $19,150 for the performance Model Y, meaning leasing a Model Y may end up costing you $17,000 to $19,000 plus more than getting a traditional loan based on the terms that we talked about. That is, of course, a substantial amount of money. Now let's go ahead and do those same calculations for the Tesla Model 3, and I'll show you how leasing the Model 3 will also likely cost you a lot more than a loan as well. Now, once again, at a surface level, when you look at the lease cost of a Model 3, especially that rear-wheel drive Model 3, you can actually lease that vehicle right now from Tesla, a 3-year, 10,000 mile per year allowance lease for $349 per month. Once again, that's with $4,500 down, including the applicable fees. However, once again, when we go through all these calculations and we go through the total 3-year finance cost and look at depreciation and things like that, I'll show you how this cost is actually quite a bit more for a lease versus a loan. Now, once again, when it comes to calculating the depreciation amount of a Model 3 after 3 years and 30,000 miles, if we look at a 2020 Standard Range Plus Model 3 and a Performance Model 3, and we look at the new price back in 2020 with the applicable delivery fee, and you compare that to the Kelley Blue Book private resale value of that vehicle, you can see that the Standard Range version has only depreciated a bit under 10%, and the Performance version has depreciated over 23%. However, once again, like with the Model Y, we actually need to adjust these percentages just a little bit because there is a smaller $11,000 difference between the rear-wheel drive and Performance Model 3, whereas back in 2020, there was actually around a $17,000 difference between these variants. So if you look at the purchase price today in 2023 of each of these Model 3 variants, and you compare that to the value of a 2020 variant, you can see that a more accurate depreciation number might actually once again be somewhere around that 20% number, while the rear-wheel drive version could be a little bit under that, and the performance version actually is probably more like 20%. I'm just going to use an even 20% depreciation number once again for our calculations. So once again, with our 3-year total, our depreciation amount, the loan balance after 36 monthly payments, the car value at a 20% depreciation after 3 years, and the amount of equity that you have, meaning the car value minus your loan balance, that gives us a true 3-year cost of a rear-wheel drive Model 3 being just a bit over $14,000, and the performance version $17,705. However, once again, these vehicles qualify for up to a $7,500 federal tax credit, which note may go away for the rear-wheel drive Model 3. That includes lithium iron phosphate batteries sourced from CATL in China. So that may actually eliminate the Model 3 from this credit in March when the IRS does give further clarifications of that credit. But as it stands right now on the IRS's website, all versions of the Model 3 are included. So for those who qualify for that credit, you can see that that true 3-year cost actually drops down to below $7,000 for the rear-wheel drive version and a bit over $10,000 for the performance version. Thus, for those who qualify for that full federal tax credit for each of these vehicles, leasing a rear-wheel drive Model 3 right now may end up costing you a bit over $11,000 more than getting a loan on that vehicle. And for the performance Model 3, it may end up costing you a bit over $18,000 more to lease that vehicle. So once again, as I've demonstrated, while leasing a vehicle can be very attractive and having a lower monthly payment can be beneficial in some ways, when you look at the actual true cost after 3 years, and if you sell a vehicle that you had a loan on after 3 years, a Model 3 or a Model Y, chances are, and I do recommend you do these calculations for your exact use case, but chances are, at least based on the calculations I did, there is a substantial difference and a substantial savings versus a lease. Now, of course, the price differences that we talked about are quite substantial. And in order for a lease to be a better deal than a loan, based on my calculations, with the tax credit included, the rear-wheel drive Model 3 after 3 years and 30,000 miles would need to lose over 46% of its value. The performance Model 3 would have to lose over 53% of its value. And each Model Y variant would have to lose a bit over 50% of their value. In addition, for those who don't qualify for the $7,500 tax credit, a lease could start making sense over a loan if the rear-wheel drive Model 3 lost over 29% of its value and the performance version over 40%, or when it comes to the Model Y, the long range and performance variants would need to lose close to 40% of their value in that 3 years and 30,000 miles for once again a lease to start making more financial sense. So really the bottom line is, based on the calculations that I've done, and I recommend once again you do these calculations for yourself, but chances are, as I've demonstrated, leasing a Model 3 or Model Y will likely end up costing you quite a bit more than a traditional loan on that same vehicle. Do let me know what you think about all this in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. And also, thanks to Span for sponsoring this video, and also the Patreon supporters who support me every month and help make these videos possible. Thank you to you, not only those who are my performance supporters, but also the other supporters listed on the screen. If you'd like to find out more about how you can support my work and join the Cleanerwatt Patreon community, I'll put a link in the video description. Thank you so much.